afternoon, everyone. My name is Joseph Young. This is our second in the multiple conversations that we are hoping to have surrounding topics of policing and social justice. We have Officer Kurt with us here again, and we have a new guest who's going to introduce herself here very shortly. I'm going to be moderating from the side as Colette, who is in the first session with us, is going to be joining us very soon. We thank you all for tuning in live, as well as those who will tune in later. Again, please, we're hoping that this entire conversation is informed by those who are a part of our community, whether here at UW Parkside or in the greater Kenosha area or in the rest of the country for that matter. So please feel free to opine, add comments, help inform our conversations so that we can all participate in this conversation together. Without further ado, Officer Kurt, do you want to reintroduce yourself?
Hi everybody, it's Officer Kurt Bergendahl here. Just quick, I've been here for about 20 plus years, and this is near and dear to my heart. Joe and I have been talking about this for 2 years, and we decided it's no longer time to just talk and to really bring this up in front and have these frank, open conversations. That's what this is all about, and we need you to help drive these conversations. Get in on Facebook Live and talk to us and tell us what you want us to talk about. Otherwise, we're only going to have the topics we have, which we think are good. With that said, we're going to introduce our new member. Go ahead, Molina.
Thanks, Kurt. I am Molina. I am a third year here at UW Parkside. I'm majoring in pre-med and economics with a minor in health psychology. I am actually the chair of the Student Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council, newly made here on campus, as well as a student representative on the Administrative Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council. I try to stay involved on campus. I'm also a peer health educator, and I actually work with Colette, who will be joining us shortly, as a Mosaic educator. I am here because I wanted to bring a student perspective into the ideas of social justice and policing, as well as bring more of a person of color outlook on these issues and bring questions to Officer Kurt that could help answer some of the questions that students have, as well as people in the BIPOC community have.
With that said, Joe.
Yeah, absolutely. So really quickly, what we want to start off with is Officer Kurt is going to go through some of, and we'll touch on this in various different conversations, but start to touch on some of, like, what does academy look like for police officers as they're starting to come up, right? As they're first entering, as they're starting to come up. And we're going to then touch on some of the questions that Molina was just referencing. And then beyond those questions, we are going to talk a little bit in terms of our reactions to what we've heard in regards to the court case for Breonna Taylor this week. So Officer Kurt, if you want to share a little bit about, right, you shared with us in the first conversation about the timeline, right, what things look like as an officer. There's maybe a more sexy look in the very beginning and things morph and change over time. Can you start to explain to us what that looks like?
Yeah, you gotta remember, I'm the old member here, and I've been in policing for the better part of 24 years. So the academy was completely different for me when I was going through it than what they're getting now. But the important part is that a lot of the police training hasn't changed. And what I bring to the table is I'm a Wisconsin Defense and Arrest Tactics instructor, which means I teach officers how to take people into custody, how to use their police training, both physical and also a lot of the tools of our trade, the handcuffs, the baton, pepper spray, things like that. So that's what I kind of bring to the table with an understanding of that, but also the understanding of what it is when we're doing these things, what our training is, because I think there's some kind of a veil of secrecy as to what it is we do and why we do the things we do. And like I said the first time, and I'll say again, we almost need a PR department for policing nationwide to lift that veil and explain, because it's not a secret. This is statewide training that we do, and this is to teach people why we do these things. Because I think if there was more education as to why we do it, everybody would be a little bit more open to what's happening when these altercations happen. When you're a child, one of the first things you learn is to ask why. It's no different when you get older. You still want to know why. We suck at explaining why. A lot of times it's not able to be done right there in the situation. But that doesn't mean we can't take time later to explain it, not only to the person that we are dealing with, but also to the community. And we suck at doing that. Part of it is because when these things happen, we can't talk about it publicly because there's a judicial process. And I think in a lot of these situations, we've become a society of instant gratification. You know, you order something online, it's there the next day or that day. And we've become a society of wanting that and expecting that. And unfortunately, our judicial system is not equipped for that. It takes time. And that's what I hope that I'm bringing to the table is hopefully we can explain why the officers are doing what they're doing from a standpoint of our training, but then also maybe talk about the judicial system and why it takes so long. And I don't know that we can ever speed it up. It's one of the best systems that I've ever witnessed in the world, but it is slow. And I think we're used to that. We want that information now because that's what we get with social media, with the media in general, with what we're doing right now. You all are feeding back to us right now, and that's what we want. But the judicial system doesn't work that way, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating for us too. So we want these cases to go through quicker, and I think that's hopefully something that I can bring and explain as we talk through some of these things. With full transparency though, I will not speak specifically on cases that have not been adjudicated. I can't. I wouldn't want that done to me. I wouldn't want that to do, it's doing an injustice then. I will speak about things that we do know or things that we may have seen, but I will not give an opinion on a case that hasn't been adjudicated, because we don't know what we don't know. I'm not investigating these things. I'm not part of it. Neither is anybody in this room. So we don't know what we don't know. And we won't know that until it's been fully through the judicial system, and then those things are open for us all to view. And then at that time, that's an appropriate time to talk about things, because now we have all the information. We have both all of the information that the jury has been presented. Actually, we would have more than that, because there's gonna be things that are gonna be suppressed that aren't gonna come out, that the jury won't be allowed to see, but that will be available as part of an open records request after the fact. So that's when we can talk about some of these cases. And I know that's frustrating because people wanna talk about these now. And I will talk about certain aspects of it, but we have to understand that that doesn't mean that I have a specific opinion on it, because I won't do that. So with that said, it's more for you all to understand that too, and where I'm coming from, because that's the appropriate way to handle these things. We don't know what we don't know up front. We have to wait till we get that. So, does that help, Joe?
Yeah, and can you tell us, right, again, when you're thinking about that timeline, and you're thinking about, you know, what it looks like to be an officer, what is academy like, you know, how do those trainings look?
Yeah, I mean, it's very militant. When you're in the academy, it's very militant. It's very regimented, and you are told what to do and how to do it, and it becomes, for some of it, muscle memory, where there isn't a lot of thought process going on. And then for other things, it's a lot of education. There is a ton of information. Think of a college accelerated program where everything's compressed, like a J term, and they compress a lot more information that you would get across a larger amount of time during a normal semester. They compress it. That's what the academy is. We're pushing a ton of information into folks that they may not have gotten during their college education, and a lot more training, a lot more physical things. And it's a matter of getting them through that and then getting them ready. That doesn't mean once you get out of the academy, you know everything. Gang, like I said, almost 24 years of experience. I don't know everything. I'm still learning, because as our society changes and evolves, so do we. We have to too. So that's when I talk about like laws need to change, things like that. I am just enforcing the laws that are on the books. Think of it like athletic program with a playbook. That's what I'm doing. And that's what they're learning in the academy, is what's currently out there and what's being dealt with and how to do that. That's what they're getting. And when you get out of the academy, you're full of all of this bravado that you're ready. You're gonna go out there, you're gonna change the world. And you're gonna do it, you know, the next traffic stop's gonna catch the next Unabomber or whatever. You feel that. You feel you're gonna do that. You're gonna have that kind of impact. And at some point in time, you get frustrated because you're not having that impact. And you just wanna help. You really do. No officer gets in this to divide our society or to create a us versus them, but it happens. Officers start to feel that way. I felt that way at one time. It's getting us through that, getting us beyond that, and then getting us to where we realize, can we just make a difference in one person today or this year? Because that's really where I'm at in my career. I wake up every day and ask, give me the strength, power, and wisdom to help one person today. That's what I do every day. And if I can do that, whether it's jump starting a student's car that's battery's dead, or it's dealing with a sexual assault and helping a victim, or it's dealing with a theft, maybe returning property, or catching the person that stole it. That's all about helping people. That's why we do what we do, at the heart of it. But sometimes we get lost. We are human beings. Like I've said before, I wear this uniform and that's what you see. But I'm a dad, I'm a brother, I'm a husband, I'm all these other things. This is just part of who I am. We have to start treating each other as people and expecting that of each other and respecting each other as a whole. And I think that will change things. I know there's a lot of division right now, but we have to get past it. We have to work together. We have to. This world cannot get better if we don't. We have to do that. So that's why I'm passionate about that. I hope that kind of answered some of it, Joe. Or do you want me to touch more
So
on
I
some of
want
the training?
Colette and Molina to give their reactions to what you were just saying.
Yeah.
Colette, if you wanna.
Yeah, no, I hear a lot of what you're saying,
Yeah.
right? So I do have questions about what do you think needs to happen in order to begin treating each other with respect that you're talking about? Because it's such a broad term, right? And even though you do this at the bottom of your core, you do this to help people, everyone's an individual and
Correct.
we just don't know, right? So structurally or in the training, what is happening currently in training that kind of, reinforces that, treating each other as humans. I mean, from the police perspective, because that needs to happen both ways, right? We need to treat you all as humans, and that happens both ways. So do you have any insight on that? Like, are there systems in place in order to make sure that that's still happening?
Yeah, and I can't, again, I don't do academy training, so I can't speak to what they're specifically doing in the academy. I know that it's always evolving. Again, like I told you, they jam a lot into a short period of time, and we've done a lot more with mental health and things like that have been put into the program. But with that, the program's grown to the point where there's limitations hour-wise and time-wise. Does that maybe need to change? I don't know, so that we can put more in there about interpersonal communications and working with folks. I don't know. What I can say from the standpoint at my department is once you get out of the academy, you go into what's called field training, and you're assigned with an experienced officer that's done the job for a period of time that now teaches you more. It teaches you more about your agency and what's expected of you at your agency and how we do things at our agency, because every agency is different, just like every person's different. So we try to do more of that. And that's something that I drive home with officers, and I know the other FTOs at my agency drive home. And we try to explain, because university policing is very different from municipal policing, so your city or county policing. We do things very differently because at the core, we're also an educational institution. So we try to educate also. That's why this is important, that's why we're doing this. I felt that we needed to do this from an institutional standpoint, that we're a place of higher learning. Let's bring this to the people and elevate what we can from our standpoint. So I can't speak specifically for the academies or the state of Wisconsin, but I think we're getting there. And I think that that's coming. I think that's gonna change. I can speak for our agency that we're doing everything we can. That's why I'm doing this, is I no longer wanna hear, let's talk about it. Let's do it. Let's talk, let's change it. Let's do it. And I think if we show that we're doing it here, other places will also say, okay, well, is it working at Parkside? I think it is. We've got a long ways to go. I think we can all agree with that. I think we do a very good job currently and have. Can we do better? Yes. And that's part of this. You tell me, folks, what we need to do to make it better.
Kurt, if I may interject.
Yeah.
How come other departments aren't asking that question? How come, Racine Police Department isn't asking that question? And then let me ask Colette's question a little bit different.
Yeah.
So you got a few things here. Were they, essentially training you with that mentality that you have now, right? In terms of what your personal belief is on your calling as a police officer. Was that a part of your training when you went through academy? And then in the trainings that you do with other folks, because right, you teach tactics, correct? And you've taught other groups of law enforcement. Is that something that you're educating, your perspective on, right? Because we've already said, right, as your personal beliefs stand, we need all officers to feel and think that way. But, because you don't know specifically what's happening at academies right this moment, what was your experience in academy? And then when you're educating, when you're teaching, is that the perspective that you're offering?
Yeah, and again, Joe, old man here, my academy training was decades ago.
That's okay.
So it's evolved exponentially from when I was in the academy, okay? I was under a completely different program than what they teach now. Mine was even more compressed. Mine was even a shorter amount of time. And by no means did we cover these kinds of things. We didn't cover interpersonal communication. We didn't cover public communication. We didn't cover any of this. This is on the job. This is me evolving it not only as an officer, as a person. And then that's what I bring to the officers in my defense and arrest tactics instruction with our officers. It's all about physical stuff. But the first thing that I instruct is use your voice. One of the first things we have in our training is our presence, number one, the uniform that everybody's afraid of. Okay, is the uniform. It's just our presence there. But one of the next things is our voice and how we use it. So that's important in the training. And that's something that I bring to our officers, that you've got to know to learn to talk and do that and be able to communicate with everybody. Because it's very rare, again, I work day shift, I don't deal with a lot of serious crimes, but even when I have talked people into handcuffs. There is a small percentage of folks that's just not gonna happen. And we're actually seeing more of that now, even rational people that are just like, no, you're not arresting me. There's a time and place to complain about it, and I always say comply first and then complain, but I'm teaching the officers first and foremost, use your voice. Try to work with the individual to get them to understand, to try to explain that why. Quite often, we don't have time sometimes to do that. It's a chaotic situation, we have to take control. That's what we're there for, take control of the situation. If our command presence, us being there in uniform, and our dialogue isn't working, we have to physically take control. And then that's where you get into that part. And sometimes that doesn't look good.
So I just want to say
Yeah.
really quickly, Kurt, as
Yeah.
you're giving your explanation, we have someone on the Instagram live that's
Good.
a recent academy graduate.
Awesome.
Academy does teach of interpersonal/public communications and cultural diversity.
Awesome. We're getting there, Colette. We're getting there, okay?
Molina, your thoughts, reactions to what Kurt said?
I guess I'm just still processing, just because I'm not extremely familiar with like the police academy process, and
Right.
like you said, you did it like a couple decades ago. So just for clarification, it doesn't seem like there was any implicit bias training that was given to people from when you did police academy. It seems like they're trying to push it currently, but have you heard any more aggressive push towards more of this implicit bias training, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, with the recent ruling of Breonna Taylor, and then with George Floyd and even Jacob Blake, and like you were talking about how long the judicial process is, yes, but there's some changes that can be made within policing as well. Do you know of any type of conversation or narrative of pushing that type of training and more of like you were talking about using your voice, but something more firm on using kind of like a psychological perspective of trying to, before using any type of force or anything like that, using that voice and then being able to, you were talking about interpersonal communication, but using it to kind of remove the whole like power in the uniform, to try to teach the officer like, hey, like, yes, I have this uniform on, but I do not exert more power over you. Is there training surrounding conversations around that as well as the implicit bias?
Yeah, and I understand the premise of it. Unfortunately, we do exert more power over the individual. We just, that's part of what we're doing when we're called to that situation. Because we're not called to birthday parties, bar mitzvahs, weddings. We're called when there's a crisis going on. So that, we are exerting more power at that point. But yes, is there things going on? Is there talk? Well, just the fact that they put that in the academy, and the academy changed, I think, probably about 5-6 years ago, maybe even longer ago, in the number of hours they put in. So that's been in place then for a while already. So that means we're already making huge changes because they added time and they put that in. So they, at the state level, they saw an importance for it. So that means we're already getting there. We're already getting there. Do we do anything here? Does our agency do things? Yes. We are always evolving. We're always working on that. Like I said, when new officers come in, we give them more training, I think, here as a university police department than you may get at other places, because we recognize the diversity of the folks that we serve. So we do more to try to do that. Now, could that change? Could that be implemented nationwide and other agencies? It may already be happening. I can't speak intelligently about what City of Kenosha, Kenosha County, Racine, or other agencies are doing. I know everybody's talking about it. Everybody's trying to evolve and see where we can go and what we can do. But the problem is we have to work together as a community, which means people have to be willing to have these talks. We have to discuss, what is it you don't like about how we're doing this, so that we can try to adjust and fix it. Some things we're not going to be able to. If I've got to take physical control of something, I have to take physical control of something. But using the voice is important. And I think the fact that they're doing the training now in the academies and have been then is helpful, and it's helping. We are mandated in the state of Wisconsin that officers have to do training every year. So the officers quite often are able to gear what kind of training they go to and request. Every agency is a little bit different, but you can request what kind of training you go to. So that's somewhat on the officer, what are they requesting to go to? And then some of it is dictated by the agency too, that there's certain mandated trainings you have to do. As an institution, there's mandated trainings we have to do above and beyond being a police department, but being a university, we have even additional. So that's why I'd like to think that we get even more training here. I don't know, but I think that you're gonna see more of that nationwide. I think you're gonna see more of that
Kurt,
as we have these conversations.
Would you be for a mandated diversity training across the board for law enforcement?
No. You know why? Because if you mandate it, people are gonna push back. I don't think mandating it is gonna help. I really don't. you have to be open as an individual to take that in. I think presenting it, mandating the presentation of it is a good idea. Mandating that people accept it, you can't. Presenting it, putting it out there, and at least putting it in front of them is helpful. But some people just aren't there.
Yeah, I think I hear what you're saying as far as if you mandate something, there's gonna be pushback. But I also know that if you mandate something that gives it some sort of priority, that
Yeah.
you're saying as an organization, this is a priority and this needs to happen whether you like it or not. So we mandate a lot of things in a lot of different organizations we know we're gonna get pushback
Yeah.
on. But you're absolutely right, they can receive it or not, but the mandate is going to help people receive it. Because you can put it out there as a presentation and no one can, the people who need it most probably will choose not to attend.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna push back on that. I think
Okay.
that there can be mandated training. What that looks like, maybe it looks different for police officers, but I think that says, like, no, we care about this.
Well, and right, like, just to say, you know, to further what Colette is saying, you ultimately have to do what's right.
Mhm.
And you yourself stated just a moments ago that it's the right thing to do, right? It's helping, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna make a difference. So if we know this is the right step to take and we know this is doing the right thing, then if these people don't wanna attend the training, then guess what? You don't get to be an officer.
You know what, I hear what you guys are saying, and I don't disagree with that, because there are officers out there that aren't ready. They aren't. I admitted on the last one that I was colorblind myself. And it was only through watching Oprah's special that I realized that. And that's only by the grace of my fantastic wife, by making me sit down and watch it, because I wasn't going to. I didn't think I needed to. And then on the second night, I realized, that's me. I don't realize, just because I treat everybody the same, that I'm not recognizing that not everybody else does that, and that by me not recognizing that, that's a problem. So, mandated is great because it may force people to take in information. I just know the culture of law enforcement, that sometimes when you mandate those things, it's not well received. It's just, I've been at trainings where officers open up a newspaper and read a newspaper, or now with current technology, again showing how old I am, getting their phones out and just on their phones. Really? Whether you like it or not, and that's where I agree, whether you like it or not, you get that information, and maybe it is, you know, we need to start cycling people out that aren't ready to be a part of the change, because it's gotta happen. It's gotta happen, and that's not gonna be popular to my fellow officers, and I'm sorry, gang, we gotta change.
So Molina and Colette, I want to allow you more time to opine on that particular topic. We do have another comment and question on Instagram, so feel free to, if you have more things that you want to bring up now, otherwise I'll go to the comment.
You can go to the comment.
So this individual says, I understand police have their duties and response. Why do people become so outraged with the things happening in the news? And is there something that can or should happen to avoid using force? So I think the first question is more to you ladies, in terms of why are people so outraged at what's happening in the news? And then the second question, feel free to answer that question.
I wanna hold off because I wanna hear what you guys have to say, because I'm passionate about this one, so,
Yep,
yeah.
absolutely. And then the second question, more pointed towards you, Kurt, is there something that can or should happen to avoid using force? And I think you talked about that in regards to using your voice first,
Yeah.
having that interpersonal capability to work someone.
Yeah, and I think that best answers that. I don't have anything really to add on that,
Okay.
but
Sounds good.
let's tackle that first part.
Well, from my perspective of just reading the news, having these conversations with other fellow BIPOC, other people who are in the BIPOC community, as well as just reading, comments, watching interviews, and hearing from like a person of color perspective, is the idea behind what Officer Kirk kind of touched upon just a little bit ago about how there are just some people who aren't ready to be in the police force, and people who aren't willing to acknowledge that there are differences among other communities, who aren't willing to recognize their own biases. That's why we push for a mandated bias training. People are outraged because they are seeing their own family members being put in these positions, and they don't get, you know, this type of limelight. They're just one of the many unfortunate scenarios where they just didn't get that thing recorded. They didn't get the altercation recorded. So people kind of put what they've experienced into these videos that they're seeing of Breonna Taylor, of George Floyd, of, you know, Jacob Blake, and they're seeing firsthand, like, it's finally reaching national news, and this is their moment to be able to talk about their own stories, to be able to show kind of more so the white community, like, this is what happens on a daily basis. Like, statistically, more than 50% of black men have been in prison. Just because, whether it's for like a small education, something that they're not even a victim of, they're not even the person who has done the crime, but they have still been in prison towards it just because of an officer's own implicit biases and the avid policing within black communities. This is why people are outraged, because they see this happen all the time, yet there's no justice being done. Officer Kurt even said, the judicial process is very long. We all know that. But even when these cases go through the judicial process, no justice is served. Because there might be fabricated evidence, there might be something that's left out just to put in favor of the police officer just because of unions and just some other underlying issue that's made within the system that our founding fathers created. The system was created this way. There's many things being said that it's not broken, this is just how it was made. It was not made with people of color in mind. This is why people are outraged. And if Colette wants to add on to that.
Yeah, I would say something to that too. I can't speak on everybody, but I know for me, I'm exhausted. Like, it is tiring, emotionally draining, and I know that there are other people who feel that way. When you hear these stories in the news, like the names we've mentioned, and we don't know everything, right? But we do know what we can see. We do know the facts that have been put out through the media. And with just those facts, it seems as though there should be different consequences happening that are happening, like the ruling with Breonna Taylor, right? So that isn't something we feel is just. I feel is just. And so when that happens over and over and over and over and over again, it is enraging, and it is exhausting, and it makes you sad. And you have to do things like delete social media because you can't take it anymore. And that's a very real feeling. And I know there are other people who feel the same way. So I don't know if I can speak for everyone, but I do know I feel that way, and I know personally other people who feel that way. And it just feels as though if you don't make some noise, if you aren't outraged, nothing's gonna change. So I don't know if that answers the person's question, but
Kurt, yep.
yeah.
Man, when you talk about feeling exhausted, that's me too. I'm exhausted. Yesterday morning I came into work and I just didn't know what to do. I went to my computer, printed off a big sheet of paper that just said, let's talk. And I went and sat for 7 hours yesterday in Molinaro waiting for people to engage with me. I greeted every person that came in, said good morning, good afternoon, trying to get people to talk to me. Let's figure this. I am exhausted. I too have had to delete all my social media. I too have had to do, I am part of you. I am part of the same community. This is exhausting to me too. I feel what you're saying about the system wasn't created with everybody in, because I can acknowledge that's probably true. I have trouble with feeling that after the judicial system that there's no justice. That is the justice, okay? The system, right or wrong, that's the system we're in. And once it's been ruled on, that's it. I brought up in a class that I was talking in yesterday, there's currently a trial in Racine of an off-duty police officer that was killed, off-duty, but he was killed. That trial's just started. It's over a year ago. It just started. Have we seen officers anywhere, Racine, nationwide, protesting outside of courthouses asking for justice? No, because we understand what the system and how it works, and that it's got to play out. And when it's done, even if we don't agree with what that jury decides, that's it. That's what we have to live with. Even if so it's a process. We have to let it play out. And when it's done, that's it. Now, if we don't agree with the process, let's change it. I can't do that. I just enforce at the beginning. I'm not part of that process. We have to change the laws then. We have to change the way the judicial system happens. That starts with voting and getting people in office that we agree with. But it really has to start with these conversations, and not just with us, with the people that have the power to change those things. But we have to have an idea of what we want that to look like. I'm okay with evolution and change, but we have to have an idea.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying as far as, that's justice currently.
Yeah.
And I think that's what people are saying, that it's not what it needs to look like. Justice is not justice for everyone. The system isn't working. And so when people are outraged, or you see things on social media, or you hear a protest, that's people's way. It's a different way. It's not like us sitting at a table having a conversation, but it's a way of letting you know that, like, this has to change.
Yeah.
So, yeah, maybe it's something about, like, people need to accept the protest, and that it's not a terrible thing to you know?
I accept it, but again, going to the media part of it, which drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Both mass media, traditional media, and social media, is people are putting information out there that maybe we don't really know. It's our own speculation. Sometimes it's factual leaks from the judicial system. But again, we don't know what we don't know. That's why we have investigations. That's why we have these processes. And we have to let them play out. That's why I don't like talking about cases that haven't been adjudicated, because I haven't had a chance to see all the information. How can I speak intelligently about something I don't know about, other than what a short 10, 20, 30-second video that doesn't show everything? Because quite frankly, do we always see the beginnings or the ends? No, it's wherever that person decides to press record on their phone, right? Or their body camera. That's what we see. That's not always a perspective of everything. Because when I turn this body camera on, it's when I turn it on. And often, I'm already interacting with somebody. I didn't know I was gonna need to film this. So then I turn it on. Well, that's not a factual representation of the whole incident. That's a portion, and that's what's seen on the camera. Again, this is a camera, it's not the naked eye. It doesn't see everything I see, it doesn't have the same view that I have. So the media sensationalizes a lot of things, because we have to remember, they are out to make money. That's what we forget. It's not just to report news and facts, it's to make money. And if they can do that by sensationalize something to get viewers, that gets them money. And so it's driven by that. Now, I like social media a little bit better, because we have people out there that are presenting what, just going out, hitting record and filming, and then just streaming it live like we are right now. I like that a little bit better, because it's not clips. And it's what's happening right in front of you. That I like a little bit better when it's done that way. It's not always done that way either. And there's people with information that are putting it out there that, or skewing it to their own specifics. So that's why I don't like talking about cases that haven't been adjudicated, because we don't have all the information yet.
Kurt, we had a question just a little bit ago on Instagram. A former student is asking, by your definition, what does it mean to be colorblind?
this is my own personal, what I got from it. For me, it was the fact that I treated everybody equally. That's my feeling. I was raised that way, that's the way I did it. And I thought I was doing all the right things, but what I wasn't doing is I wasn't recognizing that not everybody does that. I mean, I knew not everybody did that, but I wasn't recognizing it, and I also wasn't recognizing that folks not only aren't all being treated that way, but there are some folks that are being mistreated, and I wasn't recognizing that because of the basis of their skin color, you know, whatever it is, their differency from everybody else, that they were being mistreated, and I wasn't necessarily recognizing that. So that's truly what it means to me, and that's what I personally take out of it. That may not be the correct definition amongst everybody else,
Right.
but that's what it means to me personally.
Sure. So we've had a couple more things come in. So, right, there's again, people saying, we know what the problems are. What are the solutions on the table? What are the plans? And right, you've said a couple of times that, you know, it's not necessarily you as an individual that can change all of these policies, but what would you propose? Right? What people want to hear is not necessarily what is going to change or what's going to be concrete, but what would be your ideas, as well as from the ladies, on how we start changing. We know what the issues are on the table, but how do we start changing those things? I know you said we started by conversation, so we know that. Other things that we put in place, mandating the training, other good ideas in terms of how we change what policing looks like from the communities of color perspective.
Well, number one, like I said, my profession sucks at explaining why we do the things we do. Number one, I think the general public needs more education on what we do and why we do it the way we do it. Almost like I would love everybody to go through a community policing course, a ride along, or they have cadet programs and things like that, where come and see what we do from the inside so that you have a better perspective. I came up through a policing program in Kenosha as a youth, and that's part of what we did, is we went and did ride-alongs and things like that. So that you can see from the inside how we do these things. Everybody watching the mass TV shows where they ride with the cops and everything, that's not factual, that's not everything. They show the exciting stuff, you know, the chase and everything. They don't show what we really do. After the 5 minutes of a police chase, 5 hours of paperwork and stuff like that. They don't show that because nobody wants to see that on TV. But everybody needs to have a little bit more perspective. And not that those shows are wrong, because I think they do give a little bit of perspective, but that we need more of that so that people understand why it is we do some of the things we do. I think that, I joke that we almost need like our own PR company out there explaining why it is officers do these things in like a PSA out to the community, so that when you see these things on TV that look really negative, you have a perspective of our training, and then maybe you understand a little bit more. I use an incident from many years ago that I saw on Cops, where it was in Las Vegas, and they were dealing with an individual who was intoxicated, very angry, very agitated. They were telling him he was under arrest, everything else, and he took like this, what we call a pre-attack posture, a boxing stance, kind of against the officers, and another officer comes out of nowhere and tackles him and throws him to the ground. I think we can all agree that looks terrible. Like, what did he do? Because he was just standing there arguing with the officers, and another officer tackles him, takes him to the ground, and then they handcuff him. I personally teach that. You recognized a pre-attack posture, and it's for the benefit of the other officers, that nobody get injured, but also for that individual, so that hopefully you mitigate injuries by taking him under control quickly, rapidly, okay? It looks terrible. But they were already talking to him for an extended period of time. It was going nowhere. It was gonna have to get physical. Can we do that quickly, rapidly, and mitigate injuries? Is it necessarily the best tactic? I don't know, and this was decades ago too. But it was something that looks terrible if you don't understand it in context. And that's where a lot of these things fall, is we as officers look at it and we're like, oh, that looks bad, that looks terrible, but we also understand why it was done. Not everybody does, and you're going by the optics of it without understanding the context that we're coming from. So it's hard to explain some of these, I get it.
Molina, Colette?
Yeah, the first thing I think about is when you say that pre-attack posture, and I'm wondering, like, where did that come from, and where is that source? Where did you learn that that's a pre-attack posture, right? Because if you're not having these diversity trainings and you're getting input from different cultures have different ways of standing, talking,
Oh, yeah.
doing a whole bunch of different
Mhm,
things,
mhm.
right? And so if that's not integrated in that training, like, is that even considered when you do those things? Like, maybe that person isn't in a pre-attack posture. I don't know, I'm just brainstorming.
Yeah.
But I think that could be a solution as well, to integrate the two. Not to say that you can't be prepared and be, foresee things that could possibly be of danger to you, but how do you integrate both so that, it's probably the best solution.
And I personally do that, and I also teach self-defense classes where I talk about the same things in my self-defense classes, and we do talk about cultural changes, diversity changes, and different stances, looks, things like that. I bring up something that I learned on the job working at Country Thunder one year that I never would have thought of, but was removal of the cowboy hat as a pre-attack posture. Who would think somebody taking their cowboy hat off is a pre-attack posture? It is. If you work out west, you would know that. I work in the Midwest. How many cowboy hat wearing people do I come across? Not a lot, but at Country Thunder, they're all over. Well, the reason being is they spend a lot of money on those cowboy hats. They don't want to wreck it. So the first thing they do when they're getting ready to get into an altercation is take it off. How would I have known that? I didn't find out until I got my first couple of brawls and found that out. So some of it is cultural learning on the job, and that was something I learned. So yes, it is integrated, and I teach it both in my police training with officers, but also in my self-defense training. And I'm just bringing a couple of things, but yeah, I do talk about those things. I do bring up that in some cultures it's disrespectful to look somebody in the eyes. That's not because somebody is trying to be deceitful or dishonest or not talk to you. It's just culturally, that's not. I also speak about in some cultures where people are right here and talking inside of that three-foot bubble that we all have in the United States. No, in some cultures, right here, we're talking, right here. Okay, for an officer, that's, oh, back off. But we have to talk about that. That isn't something you throw somebody to the ground for. So that is happening and does occur and has occurred in the training. So we are doing that again. But would you have known that? No. That's the importance of this.
Another question here, how much of these policies are evidence-based versus this is what's done because it's always been done this way?
It's hard to answer that because you're talking about policies. Policies are integrated by departments. Some are mandated by the state, some are just interdepartmental policies. The policies mandated by the state are based on evidence, okay, evidentiary things. That's how we get to those policies, things that have happened in the past. Some of it's through the legal system. So policies can vary. There are some that are mandated in the state that you have to have. So that they are evidence-based. You know, it's not, we don't just make these things up.
Okay. Another question, what does it mean to defund the police? Colette or Molina, you want to tackle that one?
Well, when protesters, much like myself and others, when we say defund the police, we mean kind of reforming the financial structure when it comes towards the police. Like in city funding, there's obviously different allocations of money for different areas, and one of it is policing and neighborhood safety and crime. So when we say defund the police, we say let's reallocate those funds into issues that completely prevent, like preventive measures rather than corrective measures, which is what the police is. Preventive means like providing more education for urban communities, you know, your black and brown community, because nearly every system in America is inherently racist, and one of that is education, as well as maybe fueling more into the healthcare system for neighborhoods that can't afford proper clinics, proper hospitals, putting money there, as well as putting more money into mental health services for people who are impacted by poverty, by homelessness, by lack of education, by hunger. That's what we mean when we say defund police. We want that money to not be put into furthering weaponry and possibilities for violence within the police force, or just any of that. We want money to go towards things that can prevent any type of altercation for a quote-unquote crime, or to prevent, you know, the school to prison pipeline, or just to prevent any more reasons for the police force to be policing in communities of color. And if Colette wants to add on to that.
Oh, I think that was a great explanation.
Can I?
Yeah.
I'm not in favor of defunding the police. I think we need more funds. You all are telling me we need more funds because we need more training. We need more of that. So if we've got to do anything, we've got to fund police better, but we also need to allocate funds for mental health, for hospital systems, all those things. It's a much broader issue. We need jobs. We need all these other things, because the reason why we're in the neighborhoods we're in, when you're talking about municipalities and things like that, that's where the crime's happening. Why is that where the crime's happening? Because no matter what, you're gonna provide for your family. Whether it's doing crime to do that or whatever, you're providing for your family, no matter what, because you don't have a job or you don't have means to get to that job. We have gotten rid of, or corporations have left our communities and left them without having a means for the community to thrive with jobs. A lot of the jobs that have left the Kenosha community specifically, it left vacancies. The city has grown, there's more people here, but there's less of those jobs that can really sustain a community that you can live on, a livable wage. I'm not talking about working at a fast food restaurant. We keep trying to raise those to be able to pay people a living wage. That's not what those were designed for. Jobs that help. So we need to bring those back. We need to push for industry to come back here and create jobs that you don't necessarily need a college degree for, but that you can support a family on. And that's where I think we need to fund mental health, number one. I worked in a mental health facility before I was a police officer. There needs to be more funds there. We need to do more for our community. I agree 100%, but we need to also fund the police better and give them the training. I agree, you don't want to see more weapons, but the training is a weapon too. We are reactionary, I get that. We can't be as proactive as we want to be. But I agree to a portion of that, but I think we need to fund things better, including the police.
So in the first conversation that we had, Kurt, you said that you would be for taking some of those funds and reallocating them towards maybe social workers or other individuals who are more equipped to deal with certain levels of situations. So I think, I just want to make sure that we're understanding your perspective clearly. You're not necessarily for like taking away resources from police officers necessarily.
If those funds, because every city has X amount of money, I get that. And we've talked about taxpayers and everything else and where those funds are coming from. I would like to see more funds coming in so that we can do them both. I understand that if there's things that we can't do as well as the public wants us to do, and those funds can be addressed somewhere else, then maybe that's what we've got to do. But same token, I would much rather see us better fund the police and handle those.
But for the purpose of education, is what you're saying, or to be able to be better equipped to handle specific types of situations.
Yeah.
Rather than arming yourself to the nth degree.
No, I mean, we need that armament too. We need it, because there's situations where it's needed. You know, I was involved in Kenosha, we need that stuff too. By far not as often as we need the training though. So let's get the training too. Let's do it all.
So we did have another individual that said education and training is a small part of the knowledge for any job, which I don't think is a true statement, because if you think about the medical field, for example, right, that's not a small part of your training. That's everything, right? Your education, that's a blanket statement that I think is untrue. But it says more people need to understand that being an officer is a job, and no one can know everything about a job. Thank you for the job you do, the person you are, was what they wanted to comment to you. But again, I just want to challenge that way of thinking. We should demand a certain level of excellence and a certain level of training and a certain level of education, because as Officer Kurt has mentioned numerous times now, our taxpayer dollars go towards his profession, right? If that's the case, then that means that technically officers work for the community. However, that's not how policing is playing out in the real world. So if it's gonna be structured and set up that way, then we as the people, as you mentioned before, right, should be informing officers on how we wanna be policed, quote unquote, right? Then that's not an acceptable, you know, it's a job, and it's, you know, you're minimizing the importance, life and death circumstances that this job can have on a person's life. Just want to get to a couple more things here before we round up this session. I don't want anyone to feel like we didn't get to them. We had another comment where the individual said if they cannot accept that people have cultural and ethnic differences, then they should not be allowed to be officers. Had another individual that basically just said police unions, can you speak on this? And right, you can't speak for every police union. I'm not sure.
I don't belong to one anymore.
Yeah, and I'm not sure
So,
exactly
yeah.
what the person is looking for.
On that previous one, Joe, real quick though,
Yeah, sure.
read that one real quick again, the previous one to the one you just read.
If they cannot accept that people have cultural and ethnic differences, then they should not be allowed to be officers.
I have a hard problem with that because like I said, I have changed. So it's an education thing and it's a evolution thing, okay? So I can't accept just the premise of that because we can all change. That's the purpose of these conversations, is educating one another and changing and evolving. So, I can't accept somebody that's completely unwilling to be open and do that. Yeah, they have no business doing this.
And I think that's what the person is trying to say.
Yeah.
Okay, couple more things here. So we had a question that was asked multiple times, what is the UW Parkside Police Department doing to promote an anti-racist culture?
This is part of it. I mean, I can never not be a white male. I can never understand what it is to be a person of color. I can't. I'm not. What I can try to do though is educate myself based on what you all tell me and try to change how we do things. That's all we can do. We go through training. We do diversity training. We do these things. That's what our department does, and we do it regularly. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it's not. All I know is, for me personally, this is what I'm doing to try to help and change. Leading by example. That's what I'm trying to do, is lead by example, much like I did yesterday.
So the same individual who earlier talked about some of the trainings that are happening now in the academy said, for the girls, thoughts on society being trained to respect, I'm guessing law enforcement or respect in general maybe, learn responsibility and take up ownership on crime or being involved in crime.
Yeah, I mean, that's a deep question, but I think that I would be interested to know more about what they mean by that question, because I don't know if people are upset if people commit crimes and are, you know, if people commit a crime, we all understand they have to go through the law enforcement, right? I think it's the maybe abuse of power that's happening that people are upset about. So I don't think anyone's trying to say that if someone commits a crime that it shouldn't go to jail or whatever the case may be, but is the term of their prosecution too long? I mean, people are dying that are innocent. So that's what we're really talking about. So I don't think that that's necessarily a problem, in my opinion, that people are trying to avoid their consequences for their actions. It's like, are the consequences just for the action that is happening? That's the question that we have.
Right, and we know based on statistics that they're not.
They're not, right?
That the law is applied differently depending on how you look, in many cases, right? Again,
Right.
we've used these analyses before, and there's actual statistics out there. So what we always encourage folks to do in this conversation, this entire conversation is meant for education on both sides, right? Take the time to actually look at the numbers, educate yourself, right? Find out what the statistics are actually showing from multiple sources. I think if you look at that information, then you're gonna see that things have been lopsided, unfortunately, right? And again, we know that in terms of how the law is applied to certain situations based on how people look or where they're coming from, that in many times or some occasions can lead to death, if not some sort of other bodily harm.
And I think those statistics are skewed though also because of where are the law enforcement resources being placed. They're being placed in the communities where the crimes are happening. Unfortunately, those are the same communities that we have a larger minority population. So we also have to keep that in mind too, that that is part of the reason why those statistics are the way they are. Because you look, even in our own communities, our surrounding communities, where are the police resources being placed? Well, where it's higher crime level. And then that skews the statistics then. So we also have to keep that in mind too.
I think that's all I see on Facebook. I'm trying to get back in here to the Instagram. I'm not seeing anything else pop up here.
Molina, did you have anything else to add to that?
I think just reiterating what Joe and Colette said, if you look at the statistics, white individuals have been let off for the same crime much more than their black counterparts have. You can see it with your own eyes, you can read the statistics, you can go through everything. Usually, the white individual can be let off of, for example, marijuana possession with just a warning, or with 100 hours of community service. Whereas the black individual or the Hispanic individual is put into jail, has to go through trial, is on probation. It's all out there. Just putting it there.
And also with that, that's talking about convictions and things like that, which is not policing in general, that's the judicial system.
Right, justice
which we all
system.
agree we
Yes.
need to reform maybe.
Okay, well, we're gonna end it for this conversation today. Again, there's more conversations to come. So if you had questions, if you felt like you didn't, have your voice heard, please know that we're gonna continue this next Friday, 1 p.m. Central Time. We'll be back in this conversation. So please bring any questions or information that you have to the table. Feel free to get in contact with us as well through the University of Wisconsin Parkside Facebook page if you have things in advance that you would like to send to us. But again, thank you for all those that tuned in today and for the continuing conversations that we hope to have.
Help us change the world, folks. Help us change the world.